Welcome into the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. Today is Friday, August 5th. My name is Daniel Dopp, and I am joined here by Mike Clay and Field Yates.
You know what I was thinking, Daniel?
Oh, what were you thinking, buddy?
No, sorry. I just was. Is that not what I'm supposed to do?
Just start interrupting immediately, yeah.
Just trying to pay homage here.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Love you,
Today's
bud.
podcast is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. Guys, we had stinking football last
Yeah, we
night.
did.
What? But most importantly, let's
Did
talk
you say
about
stinking or stinky?
I said stinking football. Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, a lot of starters did not play.
That's
Both.
true.
Both.
A lot of starters did not play. Let's just jump right into this. But one notable starter definitely did play. And Field, I'm just going to ask you, what am I supposed to make of Josh Jacobs playing in the Hall of Fame game?
Credit to our friend Scott Clark, All Biz on Twitter, who texted me this thought, and it's a great one. Josh Jacobs is going to be awesome for the Falcons this season, right? Because Josh Jacobs, in a night in which, and I pulled out the box score, Derek Carr had 0 passing yards on 0 snaps. Hunter Renfrow had 0 receiving yards on 0 snaps. Darren Waller had 0 receiving yards on 0 snaps. And Devante Adams had 0 yards on 0 snaps. Actually, Devante Adams still found a way to have 45 receiving yards and a touchdown on 0 snaps, but that's besides the point. Josh Jacobs, on the first 2 drives, had 5 rushing attempts and 2 receptions. Now, there were a few, I want to be clear, there were a few Raiders offensive linemen out there, but the quarterback was Jarrett Stidham. The receivers were the likes of Mac Hollins and Tyron Johnson. These were names that if you weren't a hardcore Raiders fan, you either didn't know or weren't aware that they were on the Raiders right now.
Yeah.
This was notable to me. Why on earth is Josh Jacobs playing in the very first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game no less, unless the Raiders have one of 2 considerations on their mind right now? A, they expect this to be a massive backfield by committee, which would be very much in line with Josh McDaniels. Or B, if they're trying to say to every other team out there, if you want Josh Jacobs, by the way, he's available.
Yeah, perhaps. And look, I'd feel better about him for sure if he did not play in this game. But at the same time, what if they got him 2 series and he doesn't play the next 3 games, or next 2 games or 3 of the next 4 games,
Wet
and they just give him
Seriously.
Right? I'm quite the opposite of the wet blanket. But look, here's the thing. Here's the other part.
On
of
my
this.
thoughts.
Okay, fair enough. But here's the other part of it. He's been a top 12 running back the last 2 seasons, right?
Yeah.
We have him ranked 21st, right? We've already kind of docked him for the possibility that he shares more touches, right? He's still, I think, really good. He's 24 years old. It's going to be a good offense, right? He should get the goal. You would think he gets the goal line work. He's a bigger back. I think he's effective. His receiving work has trended up. So, and again, we've talked about this a lot too. There's a lot of committees already. There's a lot of teams using multiple backs. So can he survive with other guys involved? I mean, other guys in New England have, right? And still been an RB2. Again, that's where we have him ranked. We have him as a fringe RB2. I think he can pay that off.
Well, we're going to talk about a Patriots running back that has been a fringe RB2 with unbelievable touchdown production, which is part of the consideration for him. So I'm a little bit more nervous. I am. I will certainly watch closely how they divide snaps over the next few preseason games, but it was a red flag, and many of the great beat reporters out there who covered the team, including our own Paul Gutierrez, Vic Tafer from The Athletic, noted that this was a storyline. And so it has my attention for right now. And maybe it means nothing, but if it means something, I think what it means is that while he has played in a committee in the past, he has not played for a Josh McDaniels committee, and they have Zamir White, a draft pick out of Georgia. They obviously still have Kenyon Drake for one more season. Amir Abdullah, if he makes the roster, this could be Brandon Bolden, who Josh McDaniels loves. They could have 4 or 5 backs, which could complicate matters for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, last question, I guess, about this game last night. Is there anybody else that you stood out to you? You mentioned Zamir White, Snoop Connor. Anyone else that sort of you're watching from a fantasy perspective before we move on?
Anyone else play?
Yeah,
I don't know.
not
We're worried
really,
about.
I think it would
considering
be,
I don't a lot of backups, right? So a couple guys fighting for roster spots. So some rookies. It was good to see him on the field, but
probably the biggest takeaway is non-fantasy. It's Trayvon Walker, the Jags' first-round pick,
exactly.
Who looked like a as advertised pass rusher.
Yeah.
Actually had better sack production last night than he had during his final college season, and I think there's a reason why he went number 1 overall.
Yeah, once guys start getting injured in season, someone like Tyron Johnson, if he makes the roster, maybe we'll have to talk about him on waiver wire or something. But right now, you're not worried about him, right? You're not drafting him. Sure. So Nothing to worry about now.
All right, another guy that we want to mention here real quick, Matthew Stafford. And I just want to mention this. I don't think there's a whole lot that we have to do right now. He's currently at the bottom of our QB. Like he's about QB 10, QB 12, somewhere in there with ESPN ADP. Dealing with some elbow soreness, likely out of team drills this week. Anything here that you guys are looking at?
I got two thoughts. One, if you are someone like me that likes that middle class of quarterbacks based off ADP, which is like anything from like quarterback 4 to quarterback 12, this might be an easy way to break a tie if you're considering somebody like Matthew Stafford. And I'm just making this up. Also available at that time is Joe Burrow, or also available at that time
Russell Wilson or Aaron
Russell
Rodgers.
Wilson, exactly.
Yeah.
This could be an easy way to break the tie if you are drafting right now. And then two, like, let's keep an eye on this. That's my other thought, is that if this gets worse and all of a sudden, like, John Wolford's taking significant snaps in practice and preseason games, Cooper Kupp is still Cooper Kupp, but if this becomes a problem going into the season, it obviously dramatically impacts the value of the passing game.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we've talked about this before. At least I feel like there's 12 guys I really feel good about out of the gate of quarterback, right? 12-team leagues that covers you. You can wait at the spot and still get a decent guy. And I've Stafford 12th, right? He's at the end of that group. I'm not going to move the needle at all on that. Maybe a little more nervous than I would if he was fully healthy. But maybe you're more likely now if you take him to come back a round or two later and go after a Trevor Lawrence, right? Like a breakout quarterback, or one of the guys we're going to talk about later on in the show.
Yeah, heck yeah. All right, we're going to talk about a couple more news items here. Mike Clay, Aaron Rodgers has made a number of comments about Romeo Dobbs, and I'm curious. 4th-round rookie out of Nevada, right? Getting a shot right now with Christian Watson, currently out with injury. Does this move the fantasy needle when a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who doesn't usually talk about rookies, makes a comment like this heading into preseason when the Packers wide receiving core is so thin as it is?
Yes. I mean, I like Dobbs coming into the process, right? He goes in the 4th round to a team that's going to score a lot of points, right? You know, I believe in Aaron Rodgers. We've talked about that. And they have an opening at wide receiver, right? There's a void here. It's a camp battle. We're going to see. He could start week 1. He very well could. He's a vertical perimeter receiver. He could very well step into the MVS role, which not a high volume role, but certainly could lead to a lot of big plays. And, you know, I'll do a little foreshadowing here. I always do a column every year, this year's version of last year's breakouts, right? Just list off all the players who broke out, find players in similar circumstances this season that could break out. And for Amon-Ra St. Brown, the guy that I picked, and for the record, I filed this before Aaron Rodgers' comments, so I'm not just trailing him.
Sure.
Was Romeo Dobbs, right? Okay. I think it's very similar. Those guys don't break out a lot. I'm not saying just draft this guy in the 10th round now. Yeah. He's a late round ceiling, a dart throw late in your draft, but
sure.
Similar circumstances.
Yeah, I think where it changes things for me a little bit is prior to these remarks and prior to the start of training camp, we had all been recognizing, I think, that if you had to draft a Packers receiver, the most likely pick was Allen Lazard. But because it's Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, we introduced the possibility the second Packers wideout could carry some fantasy relevance, and we were focused in on the names like Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins and perhaps
Amari Rodgers,
maybe Randall Cobb. Yeah. Another name that needs to be in that conversation is now Romeo Dobbs, and perhaps even without having played a single preseason game, perhaps he should be closer to the top of that conversation as opposed to just entering that conversation.
And by the way, we're not used to secondary receivers in Green Bay being fantasy relevant, at least the last 5 years or so, the Devante Adams era.
But there's no Devante Adams.
35% of the targets, right? No one in this offense is going to do that. I would think best case for Allen Lazard is 20, something like that, maybe 21.
Right.
Not going to be 35.
You won't have a top 5 receiver, but you might have 2 top 35 receivers in this offense.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about one more quick dart throw. The Athletic Zach Kiefer reports that wide receiver Alec Pierce has been with the starters from day one. Alec Pierce field is a 2nd-round rookie with the Colts, 6'3", runs a 4.3 40. Seems like a physical specimen. What does this mean to you? Does this move the fantasy needle?
Crazy athlete of Cincinnati. For those that weren't familiar with him during the process, I think what it means is not a whole lot for fantasy right now. I would say that he is part of. I saw Mike kind of raise his eyebrows.
Yeah, I did too.
Is that he is part of, and I'm trying to avoid the phrase late round flyer like every single day.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, but he's part of that conversation, right? Yes. This is still going to be a very run heavy offense. They clearly have an alpha receiver in Michael Pittman. Jonathan Taylor is a very capable pass catching back as well. So I think Alec Pierce is a name to keep in mind to stash 12, 14 team leagues. But I don't think he's going to crack my 10-team redraft league draft options.
Yeah, that's fair. 14.7, pretty high average depth of target. Yeah. He hit that all 4 seasons in college, right? He's a vertical target, very fast, as you pointed out, very athletic. So interesting to me because he may play 90% of the snaps immediately and that could be a decent offense. Like I know they're going to be run heavy, but after Michael Pittman, it's wide open, and they could potentially support a flex option there at wide receiver. That could be Pierce.
I think part of it, and maybe this is a different story because of a different quarterback, but we've been talking about like a Colts complementary receiver for a few years now, and it just hasn't really materialized. So maybe my brain is just sort of wired in a certain way to not expect it to happen now, but I do like the player. I think this is more of a dynasty conversation though than it is a redraft league conversation.
I mean, I've said draft Paris Campbell like 3 straight years. I'm not doing that now, so maybe don't listen to me on the Colts receivers.
You're recusing yourself from all Colts wide receiver talk going forward.
I love Paris Campbell. He just, if he'd stay on the field.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make one more note. Just it happened not long before our show began. 2 pieces of Bucs receivers news. Chris Godwin back on the practice field for the first time since tearing his ACL. Still a long way to go in the recovery, but obviously a good sign for him. And then Mike Evans did leave practice. I have not yet seen an update to indicate whether he has returned to the practice field or not. We are mentioning it only because both of those things are on our radar, and if we get updates over the weekend, we'll certainly address them come Monday.
Heck yeah. It's now time. Let's kick it off. Patriots and Jets, double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble. Double trouble.
As of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
Hey, guys.
Boom.
This is going to be a really fun one.
Is it, though?
I want to remind everyone that Bill Belichick hates fantasy football. What? Okay? As we go into every single conversation we're about to have, Bill Belichick hates fantasy football. I want to start with Mac Jones, currently undrafted in 87% of leagues. Last year, he had 9 games under 12 fantasy points as a quarterback. He's not a 10-team QB1 kind of a guy. He's not even really a 12 or 14-team kind of a quarterback, I'm curious. So is he a starter in a 2 QB league, or is there another like kind of league that you feel like Mac Jones really fits with?
I mean, I think he's a fringe starter in a super flex 12-team league. I have him 25th, right? So barely. Looked, he was very volatile last season. He had a handful of big games, but had a lot of really poor finishes. He really would have hurt you in fantasy. 15 scrambles in 17 games, obviously. And we knew coming in, right? We knew coming in he wasn't going to have with his legs, and that is a problem in fantasy. But I will say this. He played really well. For a rookie quarterback especially, he played really well. So is it possible he makes a leap and turns out to be a really good, I don't want to say elite yet, but a really good passer? Think like Matthew Stafford type passer. Of course, that's in the range of outcomes. I believe that for how well he played last season. But here's the thing. That's what it will take for him to be a QB1 in fantasy, right? He needs that because he's not going to help you with his legs at all. He's going to be like a Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford 0. He's going to have to put up like Herbert or Brady like passing numbers to get into that top 10 conversation. So that's why I'm just not interested in fantasy.
So I think Mac Jones is awesome as a player.
Great.
Like, I love this kid. I think he is going to be one of the breakout players in the NFL this year. And he was really good. He was the runner-up for NFL Rookie of the Year on offense last season. I understand why we are sort of putting the QB1 conversation to the side for fantasy for right now, but I'm more bullish than Mike is as it pertains to 2 QB leagues for this reason. First of all, we did see a better, like a more improved fantasy version of Mac Jones down the stretch. He actually was a top 10 finisher in 4 of his last 8 games played last season. So we did put together some nice fantasy weeks down the stretch. And this Patriots team, I know they have been traditionally very run heavy. Even when they had Tom Brady, they had years where they were running the football a ton at or near the goal line. I think this team is prepared to open it up. It's a new system this year. Obviously, we all don't know exactly who the offensive coordinator is, but it is my understanding that things are just a bit more wide open, and it kind of reflects some of the investments they've made in the pass catchers. We'll talk about them all individually in just a little bit. The Patriots have, like in aggregate, I think, a solid group of skilled players around Mac Jones. There isn't a star. There isn't a Devante Adams, but they have a solid group of pass catchers. I think he's going to be able to throw it a bunch more this year. Capable offensive line. I'm more optimistic. Like, I think he'll sail past 4,000 passing yards this year. He will not add much with his legs, but I've got him as a low-end QB2 in my rankings. I'm on the more optimistic side of most of our ESPN rankers.
Okay. Well, as fun as that just was talking about a QB2, let's dive into running backs.
So no one drafted him in 10-team leagues, basically.
I mean, in a 10-team quarterback league.
Still, for those playing in 2 quarterback leagues, Mike and I see it a little bit differently going into the year.
Yeah. So let's dive into running backs because this is where it gets really fun. Yesterday even, we talked about how do you handle running back by committees, right? How is it that you break down these backfields? And I don't think with where we have Damian Harris ranked, he's not an RB2. He's not even really a flex play with where he's ranked right now. Did Damian Harris hit his ceiling last year with the 15 rushing touchdowns, knowing that the Pats also have Andr Stevenson now there alongside of him, Field Yates?
I think he probably hit his fantasy ceiling. Yeah. And last year, 50% of his fantasy points came from touchdowns. So he was certainly the epitome of touchdown dependent.
Yeah.
15 touchdowns is hard to do in any given year. It's obviously much harder to do in back-to-back years if I can channel my inner Mike Clay. Damian Harris is a really powerful, solid runner, especially between the tackles. This guy is a really, really good football player. He also plays in a very much committee approach for the Patriots. He adds little value as a pass catcher because they have other options who will handle that workload, even though they traditionally have been one of the teams that has targeted their running backs the most in the passing game relative to league average. But he's going to need to come close to replicating those 15 touchdowns last year to return value based off of how he performed last season. And I just think that's unlikely just because I've spent the past 5 years working alongside Mike Clay.
Do we think he's another possible lead back for Atlanta this year?
I don't think that one. No, because he is too. The Patriots, they do value him, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he was their guy. Even when Andr Stevenson looked good last year, he was clearly Damian Harris was their guy. So you need things to break right if you're going to have him as your RB2 this season.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. I mean, he was 10th in rushing yards, 62nd in targets last season. He's just not a factor there, and that's not going to change team. And check this out, too. I thought this was interesting. He played more early in the season than he did once Andr Stevenson, who we're going to talk about in a second, took on a larger role. Once Stevenson stepped into that role, Harris averaged 13 carries and 1.1 targets per game. And that was also with no James White, who may be missing for a month or so. We don't really know when he'll be back. Or longer. But we suspect, at least if you're projecting the season, you would expect James White back at some point. We're projecting him for some sort of role at some point this season. That can knock him down even further, right? So there's a lot of reasons to kind of stay off of Harris here. His ADP is not too intimidating, but I'm just not that interested. There's just not much of a ceiling.
The ADP at running back 30 is fine. Like,
right,
I can't. That's what that was. I think we saw the 10th round. Like, you're not going to lose your league because you use a 10th round pick on Damian Harris. Because if he gets you, by the way, 900 yards and 8 touchdowns, like he'll probably finish around RB30 in terms of total points for the year. But a committee, touchdown dependent player, minimal passing game volume. Those are the reasons why we're more of a fade than we are buying back into him being that same guy this year.
And we like him more in non-PPR, of course. You could bump him up a little bit.
On the other side of that, though, Andr Stevenson, 5 games with 12 touches last year. He had 15.9 points per game in all 5 of those games. Like, when he gets the ball, obviously he is able to do things with it. When you look at Andr Stevenson, I know we just had this conversation about Damian Harris. Stevenson's ranked a little bit lower than Damian Harris, but is still somebody that you think is worth rostering in a 10-team league as far as a back end bye week fill-in kind of a guy.
I do. I mean, I think he's just really hashtag good at football. You know, he's just really effective, and there's been a lot of chatter about his passing game role expanding in the offseason. And again, if James White is out for half the season, that could be Stevenson that's the leader in that department. There's some chatter. It could be Pierre Strong or Ty Montgomery. There's a few, even Kevin Harris is getting work. But if he takes that role and still is the complementary rusher, there's certainly room for him to be on the flex radar. I'd say in 12 teamers, maybe in 10 teamers. But, again, if they just stick with the committee, which we kind of expect, his ceiling is going to be limited. I mean, even after he took on a larger role last year, he was RB40. And that was with those bigger games that he had, right? I mean, it's just the nature of the beast with this running back situation in New England.
There's a chance that if you draft Andr Stevenson, he has to stay on your bench at the outset of the year until we know what that role actually looks like, right? Because assuming health, I think Damian Harris is the best bet to lead the team in carries in week 1 against Miami. But if there is a Patriots running back who, even without other players getting injured, has the best chance to be a top 15 running back this year, I think it's Andr Stevenson. The path to that is, as Mike alluded to, very good pass catcher, and that stays steady week to week, especially if James White is not available early on in the season. And then just eye test, right? You watch Andr Stevenson and you think to yourself, legit starting running back in the NFL, not the kind of guy that needs to be stuck in a committee role. Now, the Patriots may very well continue to employ the same strategy they have for about 20 years now of just using multiple running backs. That obviously lessens his value, but I like the player. Along those lines, if I'm looking at the value of these two guys, I might be more inclined. I understand I should say this. I understand the argument that Andr Stevenson is a better value at RB36 than Damian Harris is at RB30.
Yeah, totally. All right, so let's transition to wide receivers because the fun just doesn't stop here, guys. Patriots had less than 30 pass attempts in half of their games last year.
I think that's changing, though. I do.
Do you?
I do, yeah. I think they're opening things up.
Okay, so if they open things up, do any of these guys that are on the board, are you targeting any Patriots wide receivers in fantasy this year if you think there's going to be more volume?
I think it's a little bit about what you need, but most of our audience plays in 10 or 12 team leagues with PPR scoring. And along those lines, I think you have to kind of pick one, right? And if I'm looking for one Patriots wide receiver, I'm looking for the one that has the best chance for between 5 and 8 targets per week, and hopefully more like 7 or 8 targets per week. And the answer to me is pretty clear. That's Jacoby Myers. He had 83 catches last year, led the team, finally scored a receiving touchdown last year, did it twice. So I understand that the touchdown upside is very limited for Jacoby Myers, but really good football player, a guy that has played a ton for them, has been on the field as much as any receiver over the past 2 seasons for the Patriots. So I'm planting my flag on Jacoby Myers if it is a Patriots wide receiver, but I think that all of them could just sort of eat away at the other because I think they have 4 guys who, as I described them yesterday, they all have the same Madden rating, right? They're all pretty solid at a couple different
all
things.
76 across the board.
They're all like, none of them are Devante Adams. None of them are camp bodies.
Right.
Yeah. Who's the 4th? Aguilar?
Aguilar,
So
yeah.
we're not even considering
Tyquan
Tyquan Thornton right
Maybe
now.
they
He's a
have 5.
2nd-round pick, right?
Yeah.
So he could be a factor too,
Who can
depending
fly?
on how he progresses. Maybe Nelson Aguilar will be the Falcons' leading rusher this year. I mean, there's so
By the
many
end of
candidates.
the end of the season, the Falcons are
could
going to have
be.
him
I
play the
don't know.
entire NFL.
A lot of people.
He could be. He could be expendable. Honestly, we'll have to see how that develops. Aguilar, obviously, they have plenty of mouths to feed here. I agree. I mean, Jacoby Myers is my top-ranked Patriots receiver. I have him at 51, right? It's just
right.
limited ceiling there. 2 career touchdowns, both last year, 10 career end zone targets. He's never been used there. I think the touchdown total goes up a little this year. You know, he sees enough volume that it should pick up a little bit naturally, but maybe Devontae Parker's ceiling's a little higher, but I mean, he's finished better than 40th once in 7 seasons. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy and be a consistent player. So, again, not too interested. By the way, Kendrick Bourne, really good player, but how do his targets go up from last year? He was already relying on insane efficiency that's not sustainable, right? Efficiency will come down. It's hard to see the targets going up. I don't think he'll repeat what he did last
they're all
season.
good players, right? That's the problem. And when I started the conversation by saying it depends on what you need, if you're looking for the Patriots receiver that I think has the best chance for 10 touchdowns this year, I will be targeting Devante Parker. Again, the ADP for these guys is like the last round of your draft, right? So if you're sitting there evaluating your final bench spot and you're like, hey, you know what? Like when I have already, and I don't like to manage my roster based off of bye weeks during the draft, but if for some reason you're like, man, I already have 4 wide receivers on bye in week 12, and Jacoby Myers can be available, like I think Jacoby Myers will be a steady bet for 10 points during week 12 because he's going to see a reasonable target share. And he may not have a touchdown in that week, but he may well have 5 catches for 53 yards.
By the way, how many teams can you, like your last 2 picks, say, and you're sitting there and you're like, it's a potential breakout quarterback and his number 1 perimeter downfield receiver? I could take them both back-to-back here, Mac Jones and Devontae Parker.
Sure.
Not a bad strategy. I mean, if Mac Jones really does make a huge leap and Parker's healthy, I mean, that could pay off huge. It could be, it could be great. So something to think about.
I think we've made it all the way through the entire Patriots offense so far. Have yet to find a single fantasy starter on this roster. Is that fair?
But how many teams can you point to that don't have a single fantasy starter, but you still think it's going to be A, a pretty good offense, and B, a pretty good football team?
Yep.
Has that ever happened?
It's rare. I mean, well, New England, I'm sure.
Last year?
I guess
Last year, New England, right?
Yeah, I guess
Not a Tom Brady
we were
like
always
New
starting
England.
Tom Brady, right?
Yeah.
So, but
Brady, Gronk, etc.
But this is Bill Belichick. I mean, he's always been like this. He does things all the time in the littlest ways, and people are always like, it's a copycat league, but people don't copycat.
It's zig when you zag, right?
Right.
So,
He's always changing things up, even like shadowing every corner on every receiver. Like I've talked about that before. All those little things he does, and teams still don't copy some of the obvious things he uses to win every single week. It's unreal. So
I'm curious, now that we've made it all the way through quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, is tight end finally the last spot where we can find a true fantasy starter from this offense? Or, in all honesty, is Hunter Henry just too touchdown dependent to be a guy that is a top 10 tight end this year in fantasy? Mike Clay?
I mean, he's been top 12 3 years in a row, even going back to his Chargers days. He's really good talent. He's going to score touchdowns because we know they're going to target him near the end zone. I think he was, third in expected touchdowns, second in end zone targets, first in touchdowns last season, and 19th in targets, which not great, but it's better than like Dawson Knox, who's going ahead of him. I'm not interested in Dawson Knox, but a few rounds later, Hunter Henry, who can finish tight end 12 or 10. You know, I mean, at tight end, if you score 8 touchdowns, you're going to be a top 12 tight end usually, right? So I'm fine with him where he's going. I think he's a fringe starter in 12 teamers.
I mentioned him in the Dawson Knox conversation yesterday because I kind of think these are like fairly similar analogs. Knox, maybe a little bit better athlete right now at this point of his career, but like Hunter Henry, like just darn good football player, right? Is going to, and Mike, I know Mike will always, and he just pointed to the touchdown or the end zone opportunities for Hunter Henry. In some cases, those can be hard to predict, but Hunter Henry profiles as like a really good end zone target amongst tight ends. He's a big body, good route runner, not like super sudden like someone like Jonnu Smith is. So we'll talk about it in just a little bit. But just like a good, reliable pass catcher. And I think we can sometimes overinflate these things. I think sometimes they are relevant. He and Mac Jones, extremely close. They have a very close relationship on and off the field. They have a trust on the field. For years, we talked about Patriots receivers earning Tom Brady's trust. Mac Jones is not Tom Brady, but trust does matter. Hunter Henry is a favorite target of Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm. All right, what about kicker? I think that's the one place where you can finally start somebody
I do
from
like
the
Nick Folk.
Patriots.
Let's do it.
Nick Folk.
I'm in on Nick Folk. Yeah.
Money. He has been
He's good.
unreal. These like how about he's like 38, isn't he? Like he was in like the XFL, the USFL. He played for like the Hartford Generals, don't even exist anymore.
That's it, though. We found it. We found our Patriot starter in fantasy, and it's Nick Folk, guys.
I love that. Sometimes you see like older, it takes a kicker like 15 years to become really good. Like just to be dominant, like elite, like Graham Gano or Robbie Gould or Matt Bryant. Like some of these guys have just been unbelievable. Like Graham Gano has been elite for 3 years now. He doesn't miss anything.
He's the Giants' best. He was the Giants' best offensive player these past couple of years.
Yeah, he really was.
No joke.
So you just have him at 8.5, Field.
So I just want to not to do this, but Jonnu Smith, just want to mention like there's literally nowhere to go but up. I just don't know that the target share is going to be there. I think there's going to be some flash plays. But as I mentioned in the Dalton Schultz conversation and others, when I'm looking to tight end to target, I am more inclined to target the guy that has the chance for a legitimate target share every single week, somewhere between 15 and 20%, as opposed to the guy, and I used David Njoku, Jonnu Smith, who Jonnu Smith might have like a 55-yard touchdown catch this year. But I think that that's going to be offset by weeks where he has like 4 targets only.
Yeah, is he over under 6.5 routes per game this season?
I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over. You know, things spiral quickly. Things spiral quickly, and I think people can look back to the New Orleans Saints Patriots game. Someone brought this to my attention. I think it was week 2 or 3 of last year, and Jonnu Smith had a play where he was like, it was one of those. It was a designed play for Jonnu Smith where he was wide open, and the closest player to him was like a safety, like 10 yards down the field. Mac Jones threw it, and it literally went right through Jonnu Smith's hands, and it deflected right into the safety's hands, and he returned it for a pick 6. And, like, that's the kind of thing that, like, you get your head in the gutter with performances like that when you just got that huge payday. So it's a human game, too, right? And if you feel the pressure of, you know, $12.5 million per year, like, crashing down upon you, it could be hard to dig yourself out of the dog house, excuse me.
Dog holes.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
No, that's going to be our new thing.
So
it's going to be dog
better,
holes now.
no doubt, but I mean, for fantasy purposes, probably like I could see him finishing as like tight end 20 this year, but probably not tight end 10.
Yeah.
It would have to be one or the other. And I think if I'm picking, it would take one or the other to be the only guy for them to finish like well inside the top 10. So that's why we have both of them outside of
that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right now, Caesars has the Patriots at 8.5 wins, Field. 8.5.
I'm going over here. I think this team is strength in numbers. They have some question marks, no doubt. They have to figure out some things on defense. Cornerback depth comes to mind. We'll see how linebacker play looks this year. But I think this team's really good. We know they're going to be exceedingly well coached. It's probably going to come down. And if, as I said earlier, I think Mac Jones is one of the breakout players in the NFL this season. We talk all about all the other rookies in last year's class, it feels like. And yet Mac Jones, by every objective and subjective matter, was clearly the best rookie quarterback in 2021.
Yeah, I'm at 9.3 wins. Not 9.2, not 9.4.
I love your precision.
9.3 wins, exactly.
So you're taking the under.
Are you already counting
that's
in your other job?
8.5.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 9.3 is above 8.5.
I forget numbers. Sometimes I'm not a numbers guy.
Yeah, mid-pack schedule, by the way. So
is doing your taxes like the easiest thing of all time?
I mean, I use software. My brother actually is an accountant.
An accountant?
So he
are TurboTax.
He would. I guess so. I use the software for taxes. I've shifted all of my my direction to football stats. I don't remember text code.
You audit the government. The government does not audit you.
That's right.
They're just like, we trust you. We know you're good for this.
Yeah. By the way, since I mentioned my brother, congratulations to him and his wife. They had their first baby yesterday.
Shut
Wow.
up! Congratulations.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so
Boy,
shout out
girl.
to Ryan and Marissa, or Matthew and Marissa. Ryan's my other brother.
Okay.
Lincoln Ezra is the name.
Lincoln
so.
Ezra. That's a beautiful name
Love
right
it.
there.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah, very
Congrats.
unique, awesome name. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Where do
so
they live?
Congrats to them. They're in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Big fantasy football fans or no?
Matthew is in a couple leagues. I actually write about him in my playbook article. There's a story about there when he first got started. It was the year, it was like, 07, the year where the Patriots went nuts. And Patriots fan, he took Brady, and he had Adrian Peterson that year, and he had Wes Welker and Kellen Winslow at tight end. He had like the whole, like a superstar
perfect lineup.
But he was young and just never checked his lineup all season, and he just kept winning and winning and winning. And then the Patriots had the bye the one week, and he got like 7 points that week, and then he lost in the playoffs. So I use him as an example of like, you can't just draft a team and win your league,
man,
you know.
that's
So
hilarious.
anyway, now I'm
That's
giving
so
a hard
good.
time, but congratulations, we have a new nephew in the family.
First time being an uncle
Congratulations.
for you or no?
No, this is fourth.
Wow.
Fourth one. So
Do you know
yeah,
what
a lot
type
kids.
of insurance they have?
I do. I think they have Geico, right?
I don't know if they do. That's why I was asking.
I
if you
would
knew.
hope they have
I was
Geico.
trying to
If not,
transition.
that would
Hey,
be-
you know what? Sometimes transitions don't work, guys. You
No,
get
that
one
one hit.
shot.
I knew where you were going. Mike was too locked in.
He was locked in on like, I'm an uncle, guys. Like that's
Yeah.
all that matters right
Well,
now.
I'll tell you what. Lincoln, of course, the second big addition to the Clay family this week behind my pool, right?
Yes.
I have,
Yes.
obviously.
Pool Clay and then Lincoln Clay.
My Geico insurance covers all of homeowners, all that fun stuff. So, but I do have a question for you guys. I want to know, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
I would love it.
Love it. Of course,
You
I
would love it.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Field has a pretty new house too. You need this too. Of course you would. After all, who doesn't love a great deal, right? And when it comes to great rates on insurance for all the things in your life, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even helps with homeowners, condo, or renters coverage. You could save even more with a special discount when you bundle your coverages. Plus, add the easy-to-use Geico mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And choosing to switch to Geico becomes an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save with great rates and discounts. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com. Write that down, Daniel. Geico.com to get a rate quote or contact your local agent and get started seeing how much you could save.
The 2022 baseball season is in full swing, and you can be there to catch all the action live with Vivid Seats. Get out to the ballpark and experience every home run, every web jam, and every walk-off. And with Vivid Seats rewards, you'll start earning free tickets from your very first purchase. Buy 10 tickets and get the 11th one free. That's like getting 10% back on every ticket, guys. From the box seats to the bleachers, Vivid Seats has you covered with tickets at great prices all summer long. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, life happens live. All right, we're going to talk about the New York Jets.
Let's do it.
Yes, Chad Pennington's team.
Jets.
Jets.
Thank you.
True story, though. Chad Pennington, the most average NFL player across the entire universe, is in fact your favorite player, though, right?
He is my favorite player of all time. He was basically Drew Brees before Drew Brees, right? In terms of just pinpoint accuracy. He had the completion percentage record for a while till Brees broke that. So I love Chad, just like watching him. Because, right, he was limited with arm strength, right? That was always a knock on him, but he could just pick apart defenses, and it was unbelievable to watch. I just loved watching him play.
You know, like when late in games in baseball, when a team is down like 19-2 and they bring in an outfielder to throw an inning, and that outfielder somehow strikes out 2 out of the 3 batters he faces. That was Chad Pennington. The ball traveled 9 miles an hour, and yet he would constantly throw for 275 and 2 touchdowns.
That was like Greg Maddux, right? He was always like a softer thrower, but just
throw.
could pick people apart, right? Yeah.
Well, this year there's a lot more excitement around the quarterback position here for the Jets. There's on and off the field this offseason. There has been a lot.
What do you mean
of
when you
Zach
say off
Wilson
the
love.
field, Daniel?
I don't know. I've just heard Zach Wilson's name a lot on places.
Okay.
But I'm curious, year 2 expectations, in all honesty, all jokes aside, year 2 expectations for Zach Wilson, not just for himself within fantasy, but the way that he can help this entire offense. Field, you want to start?
I think he was better down the stretch last year. He was much less turnover prone in the last 4 to 6 games of last season. those are some encouraging signs. He's a good athlete. Didn't have a ton of like design scrambles last year, but a good enough athlete to add some value with his legs. I think he'll be an improved player. I think that there's clearly much more confidence. He got his teammates together this offseason in Montana or Wyoming. I think he'll be a better player this year. I think that this offensive line has the chance to be pretty solid, maybe not dominant, but pretty solid. So I would say I think the arrow is pointing up for Zach Wilson and the Jets. I'm still not ready to believe that this is going to be even like a league average offense, though.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It's just the unknown. It's almost the excitement of the unknown with second-year quarterbacks, because if a guy is really good as a rookie, it's generally a pretty good sign, right? We talked about that with Mac Jones. Obviously, we saw it with Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray. We've seen it with several players. Yep. But if it's really poor in efficiency, it's not really a concern, because that's year 1 to 2 is the year where you see a huge leap in efficiency for almost every single quarterback. So not too worried about that. He did flash a little bit. I have him ranked ahead of someone like Mac Jones because he had some value with his legs, right? He had a handful of touchdowns last year. He has that athleticism to do that. So again, late rounds, you're throwing a dart at a guy that could potentially make a big leap in year 2. We just don't know. And if it doesn't work out, I heard he's actually the lead in the American Pie remake. So
is that true?
Yeah. So
wow, that's incredible.
So he has a fallback option if this doesn't work out.
I did hear. I was told that Corey Davis was his favorite wide receiver on the team, but that's just he likes the veterans, is what I was told.
Oh,
yeah.
He's
guys,
a veteran
we've
fan.
got to keep an eye out for that. Yeah.
You too. Oh my God.
All right. Well, that's a good conversation. Can we talk about running backs in all honesty?
Okay, let's do that.
Let's close this out real fast on Zach Wilson. Not a guy you're drafting probably in a 10-team quarterback one league. Someone to keep an eye on, though, based on how things shake out.
Yeah.
Fair?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Fringe starter and 2 quarterback leagues for me.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Breece Hall, 2nd-round pick.
Love him.
The first rookie running back taken off the board in this year's draft. I'm curious with this offense, how long until you think he takes over this role as the lead back, and what role, what does that look like for him?
What day did the Jets report to training camp?
That day.
That day, yes. Whatever day that was. That was when I expect him to take over this lead back role.
So what do you think he looks like? I'm going to start with you. What do you think that Breece Hall looks like in his rookie year in this Jets offense?
I would say exactly 275 touches, 1,316 yards, 7 touchdowns.
Wow.
That's
great.
Right on the money.
That's impressive.
Right? Not any less or more. So,
yeah.
Look, I agree with you. I think the guy... one of the reasons I was down on Michael Carter last year, and I think you mentioned this earlier, was the pedigree wasn't there, right? He was a 4th-round pick. He was kind of projected to be a change of pace, a receiving back in the pros. He just had a great opportunity, and he played well. Don't get me wrong. He did. He had a week where he was the number 1 scoring running back. But the Jets still went in this offseason, and they have a lot of holes on that roster, and they spent a 2nd-round pick on Breece Hall for a reason. This is a guy that projects as a 3-down back. He can catch it very effectively. Might be limited in that department, right? I don't think this is a Najee Harris situation, but he should be the lead rusher here and clear 200 carries, score 6 to 8 touchdowns, and be an RB2. Generally, guys drafted in this range are that. He's in position to do it. So even if you cap a ceiling a little bit with Carter there, still a lot to like.
Yeah, so when we talk about running back value in fantasy, it comes back to a few things, right? Like, how is he as a ball carrier? He's really good. He's awesome at making you miss. He has a nose for the end zone, so to speak. He scored a zillion touchdowns during his career at Iowa State. It was actually 56 over the past 3 seasons, but the guy had a way of finding the end zone. Beyond that, is he a pass catcher? Mike alluded to it. He actually is a good pass catcher. I thought he was totally useful in that regard during his time at Iowa State. And Mike is correct that he's a 2nd-round pick on him, but that's because the Jets couldn't find a trade partner in the back end of the 1st round. They wanted to make 4 first-round picks this year. And I don't know how much different the conversation would be if Breece Hall went 29th overall in the NFL draft, but I think it would be different. I think we would be paying a little bit less credence to the role that Michael Carter could play. The only concern I have with Breece Hall is a potential for a slow start. I referenced it not long ago on this podcast. Our buddy TJ Hernandez gets a hat tip here for pointing out the Jets' schedule. It's just imbalanced. They have a much more difficult schedule in the first half versus the second half of the year. Vegas has this team projected for 5.5 wins. So typically, if you're playing from behind, you are much more likely to throw the football. So that's the reason why I'm a little bit concerned for Breece Hall coming out of the gates. But I've got him at RB23, a guy that I'll feel comfortable with as my RB2 coming out of drafts.
By the way, fun fact on Hall, he's an NCAA record holder, to your point about touchdowns. Finished his career with a touchdown in 24 consecutive games. And he actually sat out the bowl game. It probably would have been 25.
That's crazy.
So you're right. I mean, that guy finds the end zone.
All right. So with this being said, right, Michael Carter, we mentioned him a bunch during this conversation. Michael Carter wasn't bad last year either. He's not a bad running back. Has the hate, with all the Breece Hall love, has the hate gone too far on Michael Carter now with him going, I think, as RB40?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I mean, I feel like he's just gonna end up in that conversation where we thought he would go, where he would be pre-draft, which is Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissick, James White. Like that's a ceiling, which could lead to the occasional top 20 season, right, in fantasy. But do you feel great starting him?
I want to ask a question on that, because I feel like literally the only games that he caught passes last year were the Mike White games. Like, we talk about how great Michael Carter was as a pass catcher, but he never had he had one game with more than 4 catches outside of those Mike White games, and everything else was less than 3 catches. Like, I don't look at him as though he's a Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissick type, which is part of my confusion here.
I think he's more likely to fit into that role this year because of Breece Hall.
Yes.
Because they have a guy that can be their bell cow, that Michael Carter can play a true change of pace role, which last year he was at times a change of pace, and at times he was the guy because they had no other options, or their options just weren't good enough, right? I mean, they were starting like Tevin Coleman for games last season, who's still on the roster. I just don't envision a big role for him.
Yeah, and also Ty Johnson, they liked in passing situations. He had like a 10% target share for quite a while too. So, and part of being on the field when your team's throwing is pass protection too. And I'm not sure like how well developed he was in that department last year, but again, there's a reason they spent a 2nd round pick on a running back. They were not committed to him as a full-time player. Again, when he was coming into the league, the report on him was change of pace and probably an effective pass catching back. And taking someone like Breece Hall kind of helps you fit him into that peg into that hole, if you will.
Right. The roles are much more clearly defined this year for the Jets backs, which I think bodes well for their fantasy. And even if the opportunity wasn't tremendous consistently last year, like, he's got a really unique pass catching like skill set. Like, if he gets the opportunity, if he gets somewhere between 4 and 5 targets a game, he's going to do damage because the guy is shifty as all get out, and in space, he's hard to bring down.
Let's talk about wide receivers, because this has been exciting for me. Actually, in all honesty, the Jets, like you said, win total only 5.5, but they are young and skillful across the board at all these skill position players. I'm excited to see what happens next, especially at the wide receiver position. Last year we had Elijah Moore. Current ADP is about wide receiver 40. This year you've got Garrett Olave. Current ADP is
Garrett Wilson.
Sorry,
They're all coming together. All these first
Garrett
round.
Wilson.
Yeah.
Current ADP, wide receiver 41, literally back to back. Is there one of these two guys that you would rather have in this Jets offense this year?
Mike, you go first.
Jamison Dotson.
Yeah.
I hate you.
So I am in the minority here. I have Wilson 1 spot ahead of Moore. I'm just betting on the pedigree and raw talent, as well as the heavy usage of 1st-round wide receivers. And I've been talking about this on every show, right? 1st-round receivers, especially in the first half of the 1st round, get a lot of volume and are productive in fantasy. This is an ongoing trend. And I actually pulled the stat. You look at the 13 wide receivers who have been picked in the top 10 since 2011 and played as a rookie. Kevin White didn't play, so I'm excluding him. Of the 13, 9 were top 30 fantasy receivers as a rookie. All the exceptions, all 4 who weren't, missed 3+ games. So it was injury related. A lot of those guys were close to hitting that mark as well. Garrett Wilson is being his ADP is 40th right now. Yeah. And like I said, every healthy receiver was top 30. Now, I think the pushback here is they do have some mouths to feed here with Elijah Moore, and they added all the tight ends, and Corey Davis and Braxton Berrios is there, and Breece Hall, right, and Michael Carter. The offense might not be very good. I get that, but sometimes talent wins, right? And Zach Wilson could make a leap. I just think 40 is too low. I'm a little bit higher than that, and I think that he will separate himself from Elijah Moore at some point. As much as I love Elijah Moore, I think there's a reason they took Wilson.
I've got Elijah Moore ahead of Garrett Wilson, and Mike's case is reasonable. I get all of that, but I think the talent for Elijah Moore is like too good for me to ignore. He's been one of the stars of training camp for the Jets so far this year. I get it. He was a 2nd-round pick, not the 10th overall selection, but he was a guy that plenty of people thought deserved to be picked in the 20s last year. So it's not like it's a major gap in terms of pedigree coming into the league. Beyond that, if the Jets do struggle this year, slot receivers have a great chance to see somewhere between 120 and 130 or 40 targets, which is why I give Elijah Moore the slight edge here. So I'll take him over Garrett Wilson. But I think both of these players are interesting. For once, or for the first time in a while, the Jets offense is at least going to be like pretty fun and frisky to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty giant separation between these guys in a lot of drafts too, right? Like our ADP is close at our site. On others, you might see 3-round gap, like Elijah Moore in the 6th or 7th, and Garrett Wilson's like in the 10th round a lot across the industry. So I think Wilson is the better value for sure, especially if you think they'll be pretty close in terms of target share, which I do.
Eric Carabell, very optimistic on Elijah Moore. So, and Eric, one of the smartest people in the fantasy football space. So it certainly has my attention that Eric is so into Elijah Moore.
The Jets, because they wanted more pass catchers, signed, I don't know, like 4 or 5 tight ends this offseason to go with the 4 or 5 tight ends it felt like they had on their roster. Are any of these guys going to be tight end playable in fantasy this year?
You know, I thought maybe CJ Uzomah had a shot, but there was hype for that Tyler Conklin was going to have a passing down role, and obviously they drafted Jeremy Ruckert too. So I just think they're going to use them all, rotate them in, and it'll be a lot like Uzomah and Conklin throughout their career, which is their occasional touchdown, occasional target, but no, not consistent fantasy value.
Jets tight end, for those that play in leagues where you just draft the team and the position, Jets tight end will probably have like 5 games with 12 or more fantasy points this year. I just have zero clue as to when those games will take place and which of the, and I'm going to go with the 2 veterans, which of the 2 veterans between CJ Uzomah and also Tyler Conklin will have those 12-point games.
Yeah, you and Zach Wilson both. Talk to us about Miller Time, Field.
All right, summer is all about outdoor cookouts, meeting up with family, and determining the draft order of your fantasy football league. But you know what that means? Plenty of Miller Time.
That's right.
The delicious taste of Miller Lite is what summer is all about, no matter what you're doing. And with just 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12-ounce serving, it's the perfect light beer to sip on all summer. In a world of endless scrolling through delivery options, you know what you're getting when you get Miller Lite. Beer. It's for those who actually want to taste their beer. You guys know I love my beer because light beer should taste like beer, not water. This summer, have more fun with the Beer Lovers Light Beer, the great tasting 96-calorie Miller Lite. There's nothing like that first sip of an ice-cold beer on a hot summer day. Well, maybe landing the first overall pick in your fantasy draft. That's pretty cool. But you get the idea. Miller Time for me is whenever I'm around those I care about and doing the things I love most, like hanging out at Mike Clay's pool. Yeah. So next time you're getting ready to enjoy cold ones with your crew, go to MillerLite.com/FFF to find delivery options near you, or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere they sell beer. It's Miller Time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
Caesars has the Jets at 5.5 wins. Mike Clay, you've taken the over-under on 5.5.
6.1. Is that over or under 5.5?
That is over.
Okay.
Congratulations. You're 1 for 2 today.
Yes.
You got your numbers.
I will go over. I don't have quite as precise of a formula as Mike Clay. I have not run through every game and projected. I'm going with 6 wins as well.
I can't trust that. Way off.
I'm going to take under.
6.1.
I'm going to go under.
Under? Really?
Yeah.
So,
well,
you sounded kind of gleeful when you were saying that. Like normally when you're making the counterpoint, it's like, I'm going to go over. You're like, I'm going to go under.
Kind of. We're keeping track of all of these all season long. Like we're writing down what we're going to do. And so like if we all pick the same ones, like sooner or later you guys have got to be wrong. You're not right every time.
It's a bad strategy.
I don't.
Just tail.
I don't know about that.
Also, like the fact that Mike and his projection model is often right in line with Vegas tells you that like Mike is really smart. Vegas is really smart. There's a reason why Vegas is the one that profits more often than not, right?
Yes.
So
what if Mike is Vegas?
Mike might be Vegas. Also, you know what Mike is? Mike is Daily Wager. He crushes it. Whenever I watch him on Daily Wager, I just think to myself, I'm going to go take that advice and do the opposite.
Whoa. That did not go where I thought it was going.
I mean, Eric Moody, though,
it's feeling good.
Aaron Dolan, those two, I'll take their advice.
Any day of the week, straight to the bank.
Joe Fortenbaugh before that mustache, I trusted him.
The mustache of Fortenbaugh, I actually agree with you there. If you just did a mustache, Mike Clay, mustache Mike.
Trust me.
If you were mustache Mike,
Am I
might
mustache
trust
Mike
you.
or Miller Lite Mike? What's going on
Both.
here? Am I
Mustache
robot?
Miller Lite Mike, yeah.
Mustache Miller Lite Mike. Okay.
I love it. All right,
it's a
let's do
character we need to work on.
Some listener questions from YouTube. This one comes from 310 to Yuma. What is your absolute favorite spot to draft from in snake drafts?
They asked that in the movie or something?
Yes, it was.
That's where it came from.
That's where it came from. Yeah.
So my answer is 1. If I just take this best player in fantasy, trends have pretty much shown in time that it's kind of a linear, like you're more likely to win your league if you pick first than you do 12th, right? It just kind of is linear. So I take the first pick, take the best player, come back at the turn, 2 and 3, happy. You're going to get more good players. Take one.
So Mike is correct. We have data on ESPN.com that shows exactly that. But if I'm not going to pick one, I like to be right in the middle of my draft order, just because the gap in between picks is so consistent every single time. Sometimes you're sitting there at pick 2 and you're like, wow, I have like how many picks left? 18 or whatever, 17 till I pick again. And then you start thinking about who you're going to take. And then like literally every player you considered is gone. And so next thing you know, you're like, it's the 3rd round. And I'm like, do I take Justin Tucker right now? I don't know what to do. So I like the middle of the round.
By the way, I think an underrated spot is like 2 or 9 or 11, like depending if it's 10 or 12 team league, because when you come up, you could look at the roster without, you only have so much time to pick, right? You can't be studying every roster every time. You could kind of peek at the team that's at the turn. I think actually you and I did a mock yesterday and you were at the turn, right? So I could almost do that. Like there was once where I was thinking about a quarterback. I knew you had Josh Allen, so I waited. Like I could see you have it. It could kind of tell me if I should pick a receiver here and wait for the quarterback or vice versa. Kind of an underrated spot. What's up? You're waving at me.
I was in that mock too.
Yeah, but you were.
Well, here's the problem, though.
Your picks were really bad, so like it wasn't. Just,
I don't think my picks were bad. I think Field Yates' picks were bad.
You named your team Field Yates, and it kept screwing me up. I literally like 5 times. I was like, "How am I on the clock again?"
He does this all the time. He
I
does
when the draft began, I got the first pick in the draft, and then Field Yates had the 7th pick in the draft, and I was like, "How did I just draft Christian McCaffrey?" Non-PPR, by the way. So if you're wondering,
how many Miller Lites have I had? I like, for the record, I like drafting 1 through 4. I like one of the first 4 picks, so I can make sure that I get one of the first, like the best 4 players in the draft. Or I want to be 8 through 10 because like I want to be at the turn.
You can't pick every spot. What's your favorite spot?
Well, I either want to be at the front. I want to be at the turn specifically because of what you say, because I like being able to see one. I like being able to watch values drop.
Right.
And I don't mind being able to reach a little bit. That doesn't bother me if there's a guy that I have, conviction on, but also being able to see what the other teams ahead of me, those 2 or 3 picks, if I can predict it, I can get value by getting the right guy and letting someone else fall, and I get both the guys I want. So I really like drafting at turns for me. Joe wants to know, are you guys comfortable using your first 2 picks on running backs in a 12-team PPR draft, regardless of your draft position? Given how thin running back gets, Field, we've talked about this, right? After running back 15, you start to like it a little bit less. So does it make a difference to you?
I would think in a 12-team league, that means that you're talking about the first 24 picks total here. That generally speaking, I'm going to have at least 2 running backs that I like, regardless of where I pick. So if I have Jonathan Taylor in the first pick, I think there's still going to be a running back that I have my eyes on by the time we get to pick 24, whether it's a Cam Akers or a Nick Chubb, depending on how things shake out.
Javonte Williams, James Conner, Nick Chubb, Saquon.
I'm good with all those guys. I mean, I don't like to answer too many questions blindly, but I would say, regardless of position, I'm probably comfortable with 2 running backs in a 12-team PPR league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go in committed to something like that. It's not like I'm picking 7th. I'm definitely taking 2 running backs. It's just going to depend who is available to me, right? But if you're asking, am I okay with it? Of course, if the values are there, of course I would.
If Cooper Kupp's at pick 8, I might just be like, all right, I do love the running backs here, but I'd rather have Cooper Kupp at 8.
Right.
I think that's my thing is I don't mind going in with this strategy of I want to make sure that I hammer running backs early, but when the draft falls to you, sometimes you're just like, I got to pivot. I understand. And I don't think you can do that once the draft has started too much. Once the draft has started, you got to sort of follow your strategy, but I got no issues with it. All right, next question comes from Achievement. Devante Adams or Mark Andrews in a keeper league, especially when the tight end pool is so shallow. Mike Clay.
The assumption here is it's a 1 keeper league, I would imagine. So it's basically a redraft league. Who are you picking first? Who are you picking first in drafts this year?
Devante Adams.
Devante Adams. That's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I made the counterpoint a couple days ago when we were doing, I think it was Jamar Chase versus Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, which is about as close as it gets to going away from that logic.
And you could just keep Chase year over year over year. I would take Devante Adams as well, but this is a great problem for you to have, Achievement. So you have achieved much in your life already.
All right, next one comes from Apollo Creed Bratton.
Okay.
Wants to know Elijah Mitchell or Damian Harris for an RB2 in a keeper league.
Yes. These guys have very similar profiles, don't they?
True.
I mean, they both are touchdown dependent, volume. These are 2 guys who need to score touchdowns, are probably going to have a good amount of carries, but are also going to share some carries with other talented players in their backfield. Trey Sermon might still be on the 49ers by the time the season begins. But if it's not Trey Sermon, we've seen Jeff Wilson Jr. have fantasy breakout games. They drafted yet another running back in the 3rd round, Tyrion Davis-Price, out of LSU this year. The Patriots and the 49ers are very similar in the way that they approach their backfields. So I have Mitchell slightly ahead of Damian Harris. And I think it's probably because I think this 49ers running game is probably a little more potent and big play likely than the Patriots running game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would draft Mitchell earlier this season, and in a keeper league, same thing. I'm going to lean toward Mitchell here. But again, let's say week 1 ends and we're sitting on this show, we're doing our recap show, and we're sitting there like, neither of these guys led their team in snaps in week 1. Like, we would be surprised, right? It's just the nature of the beast with those backfields.
I think and I also take Elijah Mitchell. Does Trey Lance concern you at all with that? Like, between these two, when you're looking at somebody having a rushing quarterback, being able to get in the end zone, especially because Elijah Mitchell, not a huge pass catcher?
That's fair, actually, because he might, Trey Lance might steal a couple of goal line opportunities.
Not steal goal line opportunities from Damian Harris, right? Mm-hmm. So
we would think not. Yeah,
you would expect not. Definitely. I mean, it's a similar concern to like Miles Sanders, right? Like, is he going to lose goal line touchdowns with Jalen Hurts?
J.K. Dobbins and Lamar.
Lance is going to steal more of the passing volume. That's a concern for like Brandon Ayuk too, and even Deebo Samuel. I'm less concerned with Deebo Samuel because they'll manufacture touches, but I mean, there's going to be less passing volume in San Francisco this season.
Play Deebo at wide receiver, please.
Yes,
it helps us. It really helps us.
Yeah, and look, he was wide receiver 2 when he was just playing receiver last year. So
81 targets through 8 games. You track that over the course of a full season.
That's a lot of targets.
It's 170 in 17 games.
I've drafted so much Deebo this year.
Yeah,
he's fallen into the middle of the 2nd round sometimes. I mean, I don't get it.
Good for you. I've drafted so much Zamir White this year. In
have you really?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
You're gonna cut him after week 2.
All right. It's best ball. I can't. All right. Here's Jack Sayer wants to know. Choose 2, please. Didn't say please. I put in the please. I'm assuming Jack would say please.
He would say please. Yeah.
Zeke, Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, or J.K. Dobbins.
And it's just pick 2.
Pick 2 of them. Zeke, Hall, Jacobs, Dobbins.
Hall and I'll go younger. Hall and Dobbins. Jacobs is close. I don't know. I love Dobbins.
Yeah, they're in a very similar range. I think each of those 4 running backs is between like RB15 and RB22 for me.
Exactly.
I'm going to go with Zeke and Breece Hall. And I'm going to react a little bit too much to last night and break the tie between Breece Hall and Josh Jacobs because I think last night cast a shred of uncertainty on Josh Jacobs' specific role within that offense or his future with the Las Vegas Raiders. And with J.K. Dobbins still not practicing, there's at least some question as to whether he'll be ready for the start of the regular season. And as Stefania likes to say, return to play is not the same as return to performance.
I'd agree with that. And also, it's not like last night is the start of shining doubt on Josh Jacobs. Like, they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. This has been a thing all offseason. So last night was just sort of seeing the action behind what it feels like they've been saying all offseason.
Entirely new regime. We know that there's really no allegiance to Josh Jacobs as a player. They did not draft him, and they have drafted or added multiple running backs since the offseason began and Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels were hired. Wouldn't surprise me if they traded him. He, by the way, he's a good player. Like, if you were a team out there that runs into some sort of injury issue, he could be this year's Sony Michel as far as trade bait goes, right? Sony got traded in training camp last year and ended up having very valuable contributions to the Super Bowl winning team. Josh Jacobs is a better player than Sony Michel, certainly. But if something happens with your starting running back, I'd call the Raiders.
I'm taking Zeke and Breece Hall as well for that question.
Zeke, probably the lead rusher for the Falcons in 2023.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not not going to let that die now.
You are never, ever.
You are going to dig yourself into a dog hole.
Where did you learn to beat a joke into the ground?
What?
Where did you learn to beat a joke into the ground?
I don't know. I feel it in the air right here. It's just there's something about this positioning in this room.
Here's a question from Bisky21. If you draft Dalvin Cook in the first round, what round are you using to pick on Alexander Mattison to make sure that you have insurance for him?
I would think nothing sooner than like round 7 or 8 at best.
Yeah, maybe even a little later, right? Isn't he going in like the 10th round, 9th, 10th round? He's
I'd say at best, right? It would be like
not as hyped as I thought he would be this season.
Madison.
Right? Yeah, Madison. By the way, a name to, and by the way, that's about where I would go
He's
for him.
He's running back 45, going in the 17th. ADP is 162.
He is an elite
that's not enough
back.
Data right there, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's look. As far as insurance backs go, he is outstanding. I mean, there was 4 games he filled in for Cook last year. He was the #1 running back in fantasy. And keep this in mind. just little keeper dynasty tidbit here. Like if it's around midseason, your team's struggling and it's a trade deadline approaching, he's a free agent after this year.
Madison is.
I don't know if they'll move on from Cook and he'll be their lead guy, or he goes somewhere and goes the Michael Turner route. And he's really young. He came in like really young and is lead back somewhere else next year. Really interesting name because I think this is his last year as a backup in the NFL.
Heck yeah. That's going to do it for our YouTube questions. Please keep asking questions in our YouTube chat. We love being able to answer them at the end of every show. And follow @FantasyFocus on Twitter. Jackson puts out a ton of polls and questions. We do a bunch of interaction there. So, guys, first week of Fantasy Focus is in the books.
How'd it go? What do you think?
I was a B-. I think you were a C+. Field was an A. Come
Wow.
on.
Field's always an A. We know that.
Stop
I'm
it.
not asking about him.
You stop it. Congratulations to our friend and the person who used to be the central point of this podcast, Matthew Berry, who started off at NBC last night.
Congrats,
Matthew,
buddy.
we love you. We love seeing you on TV last night before the Pro Football Hall of Fame game. I know that Josh McDaniels described being back in Canton as surreal. I can imagine it was surreal for you as well. We all love you. We can't wait to watch you kick butt over there at NBC. For us, Fantasy Focus back on Monday. We cannot wait to bring the latest with news and more Double Trouble for Mike and Daniel. I am Field. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
We don't have to wait till Monday to go over to your pool, do we?
I was going to say, what time?
The electrician's there now putting the light in and all that stuff. So
What,
tonight,
putting electricity
all
in
night
your
pool?
Okay.
Okay.
So we can go.
So
There's
you
some
leave it
rafts,
on
we
for
can
us.
hang out.
We can come over and it'll already be lit.
Anytime.
Wow, you're like the most